A conversation we started before the president's speech with Hugh Hewitt, radio talk show host and frequent contributor around here. Hugh, thanks for your patience. You got into, we started talking about military funding. The president likes to say that our military has been depleted, our military has been decimated. In what way has our military been depleted, and in what way would you spend the money the president's talking about spending?
He said tonight in the speech, Brian, that he was going to do away with the sequester, and the most obvious indice of the sequester effect is that 60% of naval aviation assets can't fly right now. They're deemed not ready by the Navy, 6 out of 10 F-18 and other strike aircraft. But you bring me to the key point, Brian. There was a transcendent moment tonight, and we run away from it because it involves real grief, and it was the prolonged, sustained applause for Mrs. Owens. And I think that that also showed something Chris mentioned earlier, the president as commander-in-chief and being willing to do the very hardest job that a commander-in-chief does, which is to recognize and talk with the families of the fallen. And I think tomorrow, all around the country, they may be talking about the disaster that is Obamacare, the regulatory rollback. He did call on Neil Gorsuch to be confirmed swiftly. But they'll be talking about Mrs. Owens. They may be talking about Megan Crowley. They may be talking about Denisha. But I think that sustained applause, it was a very patriotic speech. And in the blue states that went for Donald Trump, and the reluctant Trump voter that's out there wondering, can he do the job that I put him in there after this barrage of the first month? I think they're tremendously reassured by what I thought was a tremendous speech with a transcendent moment.
A transcendent moment, to be sure, and it would take someone awfully hard-hearted to find any fault in it, Hugh, but will you concede that in the run-up of the last 12 hours before this speech tonight, the president got a little sideways on the mission itself, seeming to indicate in his interview with Fox and Friends, seeming to blame, quote, the generals for losing Ryan in this mission, and not seeming to grasp that the title commander-in-chief means just that. It's all on you. That's part of the job.
Well, I'm not going to concede that, Brian, because I understood it. Again, I always try and listen to Donald Trump differently than I listen to other people, having been involved in so many exchanges with him. I think what he was trying to say is that the mission was planned on President Obama's watch. It was executed with the approval of the generals, and it did, as he said in the speech tonight, contribute to the national security. I do think he has to become more deft in those settings. Indeed, today, when he talked immigration with Chuck and with Chris and with others, he may have overextended what was just a creak in the door tonight that I heard. So I actually listened to that and said to myself, he's got to tinker with that, but it wasn't what the media said it was. And if I'm sitting at home tonight, the biggest gap that I've got, I think, that's occurring in blue state turned red state America is the media is not recognizing what was a terrific speech by a person they weren't quite sure could give a State of the Union speech, and that's the takeaway for me, as well as, of course, Mrs. Owens.
I said it was his most speech-like of speeches, but did you just tell us we have to listen to him differently?
Yes, I did, and I put that down to the fact that it's going to go very well outside of the Beltway or outside of the Acela corridor. You know, Selena Zito's famous comment, some people take him seriously and not literally, other people take him literally and not seriously. It boomerangs around pretty much every news cycle. And tonight, you could take him both literally and seriously. For example, I heard when he took apart Obamacare, collapse. The lack of choice, the broken promises of you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan. I thought it was very deftly delivered. That hasn't come up yet tonight. So he was talking to that 20% in the middle, the 40% that are never going to like him, the 40% that is based, that is satisfied. Those 20% heard a lot tonight. Here's the downside. He made a lot of promises tonight, Brian, a lot of promises. A year from now, we're going to roll the tape, and we're going to see what he delivered, because he wants to be the promise keeper president. So he set himself either up for a big win or a big loss.
Among those promises, looking at my notes, dying industries will come roaring back to life and drug epidemics will stop. Hugh will roll back the tape of this conversation. We'll do the same thing. Thank you for your contribution.